Hey guys. So yeah, sorry this one's late. Between being outside doing the shoveling, where I was basically freezing myself to death, and not even actually knowing that this episode had aired yet, yeah, sorry it's a little late for that. But right out of the gate, let's talk about the importance of Chocolave's fight with the kids in this episode, because under like understand what the meaning of the fight it means. Like when you get right down to it, even though Yo puts on this grand big speech about hatred, all that stuff, ultimately, like none of what happened between that fight between Chaco and the kids was resolved. Was resolved. Like there are things that are going to be forgiven for sure, but Chaco Chaco himself couldn't even convince the kids of his sincerity towards just how regretful he is of killing their father. Like these, and it shows that even if Yo is willing to apologize on his behalf, these are demons that has been. These are demons that are going to follow Chaco for the rest of his life, despite how much he's attempted to change. And in some ways, also goes to show that in Chaco's attempts to change, he's kind of also gone to even greater lengths to bury his past. But now with this fight, he was not only forced to confront his past, but now he has to. But now going forward, after he's revived and everything, he has to make a genuine and honest effort towards moving forward to prove just how much he has changed, that he's not just the same person he was. And one and and one other little thing I also love is that his past and the life he lived is in some ways responsible for the death of the people he's cared about twice now. The first one being his master and now his old crew, but neither does it make what the kids did any better than what Chaco did either, because now, despite what Yo's done towards getting the kids to understand their path of hatred and revenge was going nowhere, Chaco himself is still put in a position where he has to prove himself that the person he is now isn't just a facade, that it's the person he wants to be, that the path he's on now is the genuine one he chose for himself. And it's really kind of just, and I'm again, this is one of those things that really makes Chuck. I think this is one of those things that really, where the reboot does justice, because it really gives these character arcs are much more, that are just overall much more powerful than what the original anime gave us. And honestly, I think even like the original anime just kind of dropped that whole plot thread of him being a gang member. So yeah, it just kind of went nowhere. I think for obvious reasons though. Uh, Of course, we get a huge mystery solved through Chaco's death, which is that we learn more about just what the Great Spirit is, which is that it's a giant, like, in a lot of ways you can say that the Great Spirit is a giant, like, hub for spirits, and it's a representation of what the afterlife is to so many people. And even more so, I love, again, going off that, I love how we dive into the ideology that when a person becomes one with the Great Spirit, when they become part of the spirit world kind of thing, there are many different, it shows that there are many different planes. That makes a concerted effort to show there are many different planes of existence, and no two planes of existence are alike. It's that every person on this planet has their own unique, has their own spiritual plane that they're a part of. Like it's a very unique way of kind of addressing the many different representations of God and people in humanity's mind, like, and how in real life that pretty much belief can basically manifest itself in the afterlife as well. Like in a very real world broad sense of looking at the afterlife, like absolutely no one in this world like views God or the afterlife in the same way as others do. Like we all have our different interpretations of the afterlife, and as someone who like fancies himself as much more of a spiritual person than a religious one, this idea of of a spirit of representations of this of spiritual plane and how human beings, animals, everyone views like the afterlife in a different way. That's the kind of shit I really resonate with me, and I really resonate very heavily with, as it shows as it really does show that no one belief is really the wrong one. The they're all different, and your version of the afterlife is the one you make of and you craft yourself. It's honestly something that nowadays feels like really ahead of its time, and I just really love how we're getting to explore just the idea that the Great Spirit, this idea of the Great Spirit, and just that with its world as well. And it's honestly through the exploration in itself that kind of reinforces just more of why Hal must not obtain the power of the Shaman King, but also why he probably still will, because in his in-house current mentality about how he views the world, he basically destabilized the very laws of life and death to become truly immortal, and that would put that would put everything out of complete whack. Honestly, like I don't want like one thing I really do appreciate about this is that it really kind of elevates like what it kind of takes like I said, it takes How's motivation of wanting to destroy or kill the Great Spirit in the original anime, and it kind of elevates that shit even more to the point of saying like, yeah, this is actually kind of terrifying thought if he were to ever gain the power of the Shaman King, gain the power of the Great Spirit. Like he would effectively rewrite the laws of life and death and probably just kind of do away with them to begin with. Frankly, if you think about how is, now. I do want to talk. Now, with that said, I do want to talk about the subtitle translation of this episode, because from the beginning, they weren't the most trustworthy to me, and I don't know if this is how they've always done it, and I'm just not noticing it. But in this episode, they changed Chocolave's name to Jocko, which was his name in the 4Kids dub, I guess, or something like that, in this episode. And it's weird, because I don't get hung up on little details like that all the time, and I don't know if this was intentional because the translators got some kind of backlash, or it's just a one-off mistranslation thing. But in this episode, for some reason, just by changing that one name, it felt especially jarring in this episode. I think mainly because like people would say Choco, but the word said Jocko. I don't know, it's weird. If and it wasn't actually even just the name itself, but the sub-translation this week generally felt really off, even more than normal. And again, something if someone in the comment section tell me if it's just me or if something felt weird to you as well, because about how the subs were translated this week, because it really felt off for me. But getting away from that though, one of the bigger mysteries with this episode is just what the hell that golem is, or even for that matter, who Professor Munzer is, because right now we only seem to know him as Mickey. He's his friend and the kids and the father of those kids. And honestly, I'm kind of being a little bit spoilery, but from my reading of the manga, there's nothing we really learn about the professor other than what we learned in this. Other than what we learned in this episode about why he made the golem. Like when you really look at when you look at the subtext, he kind of made the golem in order to defend against Hal. But I don't think we learned much else past that point. Again, it's technically a spoiler, but that is kind of where the story thread of Professor Munzer ends. Unfortunately, like Munzer's kind of like just a plot point in order to get the whole thing with Chocolave and the kids kind of going, I think. Also, one big thing to note about this episode is that there were large chunks that were cut out of the adaptation of this episode, and I don't think it was anything too important, but I think this was an episode where the studio got a little too gung-ho and might have adapted more than what they should have, because this episode adapted 7 whole chapters in just a single episode, and in some ways it kind of shows. Like, it's kind of hard to describe, but let's just say this is an episode where the pacing just felt really off this week. Like, in certain moments where I think it should have ended, it didn't. So it's like, yeah, it's not a bad episode pacing-wise, but the pacing is kind of all over the place too. But yeah, with that said, guys, that's all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. I'm on Twitter, it's Control. Be sure to the notification bell, the subscribe button, and just share the video around, guys. Dark Knight of Anime, signing off. Later, everyone.